All right, we're doing the last section of chapter 1, yay, 1-9, opposites and absolute values. Okay, so opposite numbers, let me write that, opposite numbers add to 0, so that's how you know they're opposite. So, for example, 4 and negative 4 are opposite numbers from each other because 4 plus negative 4, right, equals 0. So they are opposite numbers from each other, okay? For the following, A is going to represent any real number. So we're using A as a variable, okay? So it represents any real number. So I'm going to give you some 4 facts about opposites. If A, which is our variable, if A is positive, then negative A is negative. For example, positive. So if we have, let's say A is 3, it's a positive number, then you would have negative A, and negative A would equal negative 3. Okay, so now if A is negative, now you gotta think in your head, A is a variable, it represents a number. The number could be positive or negative. We just showed the positive situation, but it could be negative. Then negative A is positive. Although it sounds weird, it's just saying basically when you have that negative in front, it's saying the opposite of whatever A is. And since A is negative, then negative A has to be positive. For example, if A equals negative 3, then negative A is 3 because it's its opposite. Again, if you think about it, we know that A is negative 3, and so I'm basically putting, let me just write it in a different color. I'm basically saying a negative A, which we said A was a negative 3, and negative times negative is a positive, so that's why it is a positive 3. Okay, don't let that confuse you. It's just basically saying you switch them back and forth for opposites. Now, if A equals 0, then negative A equals 0. Why? Because 0 plus 0 equals 0. 0, let me write that in a different color. 0 is its own opposite. Opposite. Because you can't have a negative 0. And we know that 0 plus 0 equals 0, and that's what the definition of opposites say. So, the opposite of negative A is A, or, like I said earlier, it is negative A, which we know negative times negative is a positive, and that's why it is A. That's why it works. For example, A equals 5. That means that negative A equals negative 5 because, let me put that little splitters, because negative of negative A equals 5. Because if you take negative A, which is negative 5, and multiply by that by a negative, you get a positive. Okay, but these are all like scientific, or not scientific, mathematical facts. I'm just laying out the facts for you, but really, if you have a number that's negative, its opposite is the same number but positive. If you have a number that's positive, then it's the opposite is the same number that's negative. Don't let this overly confuse you. It's just mathematically stating it. Now we're going to get to absolute value. Now, absolute value, it's written like these. These are absolute value signs, and then you have a number or a variable inside. So these are the absolute value signs, those lines. Make sure you make them big enough so that you don't get confused that they're a 1. Okay, so the absolute value of A. If A is positive, the absolute value of A equals A. Okay? for example, squeeze it in right here. For example, if A is 5, the absolute value of 5, or let me write it out to the side. That's not enough room. Oops. Okay, so write it to the side. Example. If A equals 5, then the absolute value of A equals 5, because it's whatever A is for if it's positive. Now, if A is negative, then the absolute value of A equals negative A. For example, if A equals negative 6, then the absolute value of A equals positive 6, because a negative A, which we know is 6, equals 6. So basically all absolute value is saying is that you take the number and you take the positive form of it, okay? So if it's already positive, it stays the same when you take the absolute value. If it's negative, then you have to change it to positive. That's all it's saying. Okay, so if A is 0, then the absolute value of A is 0, because 0 is not positive or negative. It's neutral. And now we need to simplify. So absolute value, kind of like parentheses, you need to do those first. So I need to find the absolute value of negative 8, which is a positive 8, and the absolute value of positive 4 is just a positive 4, because they both have to be positive. So add those together, and the answer is 12. Now, again, I'm going to do the absolute value first. So the absolute value of negative 11 is 11, and then I'm just going to be subtracting 11 after it, which gives us 0. And now it says, solve equation over the set of real numbers. If there's no solution, explain why. So it says, basically, find any number that makes x, like if I plug in for x, makes it true. Well, I know that if x equals 3, the absolute value of 3 is 3, so that works. But I also know that if x equals negative 3, the absolute value of negative 3 is 3. So you actually have 2 answers for that. And for the last one, the absolute value of n equals negative 9. Well, I know that that is no solution. Why? I have to explain why. Because the absolute value must be positive. It has to be positive, so therefore you cannot take the absolute value of a number and it end up having an answer of negative. Not possible. It'll always be a positive number. So there you have it.